don't know why I'm here, but I've been invited by Mark to talk about my life. I published a book recently, on the 18th of September, titled, Converted on LSD Trip. Or as my son says, was my dad really converted on an LSD trip? And an alternative title could be, or was manic depression the cause? Now I'm going to ask you guys to answer that question after you've heard what I have to say. The reason for the title is that it's the headline news of the Bucks Herald newspaper, dated the 11th of February 1971. And that occurred because I appeared in court on the 9th of February 1971, answering charges of 24 crimes, 3 of which I was convicted for, the rest were taken into consideration, after I confessed to the police a year after that I became a Christian. And the magistrates that day, when sentencing, covertly said to me and the court that the crimes that I had committed, which was a 3-year period of undetected crime since leaving law school in 1968, were quite the worst case that they had ever had to deal with. And they felt that I was trying to be a martyr, because he said, your evident desire to be a martyr is one thing we're not going to gratify. And I was expecting to be sent to prison for at least 3 years, but they conditionally discharged me for 3 years, to my relief and celebration of all my friends. That I became a Christian after experiencing a bad trip on LSD. On the 16th of January 1970, I had taken LSD and given my brother drugs that night, and I had this bad trip, and in my desperate state of mind and need, I called out to God, saying, Jesus, please help me. And he heard my cry. And as a result of that, I turned that night from crying to Christ. My brother was left untouched. He'd taken drugs that night. The story is also about my brother. Now, before I just mentioned that, I want to say, 25 years later, he ends up in prison in the Philippines, serving a 16-year prison sentence for a crime that he actually didn't commit. That's not to say he wasn't guilty of certain things. He was, but he wasn't guilty of the crime that he was sentenced to prison for. 5 years after that conviction, in the jail in the Philippines, he became a Christian too. 30 years after I became a Christian. He became a Christian through reading C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity, and was convinced that Jesus was Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, the essence of what I'm going to talk about today is recorded in detail in my book, Converted on LSD Trip. Also, in the other book I've just published is with Big Strict to Particular Baptists. I'll tell you about that later. But the essence of my story is recorded in both these books. And also, in Trojan Warriors, my brother's imprisonment. Now, my background. Michael and I were born in Oldham, Lancashire. Michael was born in 1946, just after the war, and I was born in 1949. And we both lived with my parents at my grandfather's home at 26 Fleet Street, Oldham. We moved to Watford when I was 6 years old, and I went to Garston Infant School, while Michael went to Lee Farm Junior School. My mother was a nominal Anglican, and she used to take us to church, and I remember her taking us to church in Watford one Easter Sunday morning. And we went to the Congregational Sunday School, and there the man was telling us all about the crucifixion. And I can remember the man telling us the story, and I thought to myself, when Jesus was being crucified, why didn't Jesus just get down from the cross and confound them Pharisees? Because I believed he could have done so. I didn't know then why Jesus had to die. But that was my first impressions of Christianity and things like that. When I was 15, we moved from Watford to a village called Wilston, and my parents owned the village shop. And it was there brother and I got into trouble. We were from Watford, and they thought we were from London because we came from Watford, and this was a village in Tring near Aylesbury, and they were country folk. And my brother soon got into trouble, and so did I. I got in trouble for stealing a shotgun from a farmer, and my brother got in trouble for causing grievous bodily harm to someone. He'd hit someone with a knuckle duster that he'd made at the Tring Secondary Modern School, and he got sent to Borstal. No, he got sent to detention centre, and that was his first spell, and of course it really upset my parents. My mother was so distraught. The trouble is, he then was resent to detention centre again, to Kidlington. He did another spell in detention centre. Soon after that, when he was released, at 17 years old, he got in trouble with the police again. I don't know what his crimes were, but he was sent to Borstal, which is a 2-year stint, to Rochester, Borstal. So that's my brother, and I didn't really know what was happening to him or why. Mother was so distressed and distraught with the village life and the repercussions of our activities that she was depressed herself, and she was on Valium, and so they decided to leave the shop and move to Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire. We bought our first home there, new home that was. The village shop was at my mum and dad's, but they brought a new home off the plan house in Aylesbury, and it was there at 37 Finmere Crescent that I got involved in music, and I enjoyed music, and I learned to play the guitar. And when I grew up a little bit more at school, we formed our own band, and we had a pop group, and I played rhythm guitar. We loved the music by the Rolling Stones, by the Who, by the Small Faces, by the Kinks, and we met a guy called Malcolm Kirkham, and he was my colleague and friend. We got into all sorts of mischiefs together, but he was a lead singer. But he was always combing his hair and pressing his trousers. He never was there to set up the equipment, but that was Malcolm Kirkham for you. We got involved, however, Malcolm and I, at that time with taking drugs and permissive sex and getting involved in petty crime. I managed to get a job. My mother got me a job as a trainee technician, television technician, with Ken Knight of Central Bucks TV. The trouble was, his wife, Grace Knight, was a devout Christian, and she was the most boring person that I'd ever met. And the reason why I say she was boring, because everything I found interesting and good and could talk about, she would tell me that it was wrong, that it was sinful. And she was from the background called the Brethren. And the Brethren believed that when you become a Christian, you have to give up things like smoking, give up watching the television, give up going to the cinema, no dancing, no music, you shouldn't sing pop songs, shouldn't be involved in trade unions, you name it, it was wrong and it was sinful. And that was my impression of Christianity. Christianity was giving up all the good things in life. She, Mrs. Knight, had devoted her voice to singing what she called sacred music. She was a very good singer, and she'd sing occasionally solos at church, and she was a good voice, and her husband too used to sing well, harmony, but she would never sing a pop song. I thought she should have done, because she devoted her voice to God, and that's my experience of Christianity at the time.